Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, we're joined by the incredible Ed James. Now, quite honestly, I spent the entire episode listening to Ed's story, mind blown, listening to his entrepreneurial story and really hearing and understanding in depth all of the traits that a successful entrepreneur needs in order to be successful. The levels of self-confidence, the levels of self-belief, the levels of drive, determination and grit and sacrifice that you need to make in order to make it big in the business game. He's built a huge serviced accommodation portfolio. He's now moving into the development game, building HMOs. This story is absolutely incredible, and it could well make you realize whether or not you're cut out to lead the entrepreneurial life, because believe me, it's not easy. Guys, on that note, if you get value from this episode, if this episode inspires you to take that next step, I would please ask you to follow the show and leave a review. And if you've got any questions around serviced accommodation specifically, leave your question in that review and we will answer it during our midweek Ask a Question episode. Until then, guys, settle in. This is a fantastic episode with Ed. I can't wait for you to hear it. Here we go. Hey, Ed. Welcome to the podcast, mate. Thanks so much for coming on.
Alex, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome, mate. Welcome. I wanted to get you on because, you know, you've got a great story. You reached out to me saying that you built this big business. You've had some fouls as well in the past, which I really, really like. I want to get more of that on the show. Talk about the reality of business, the reality of property investing, the realities of serviced accommodation, how it can be great, and also how things can go wrong as well. So I really want to talk about that and appreciate you reaching out to talk about that stuff. Also, you're young. And I think it's awesome when young people are doing cool stuff. You know, we had Dan Cheatham on another episode in his mid-20s, already doing so much cool stuff. And, you know, I think you're probably, you know, quite similar age. By looking at you, I don't know. You might tell me you're a lot older. I'm hoping I'm not way off the mark here. But yeah,
presumptuous.
A little presumptuous. You look young anyway. So if you are older, I'm still winning.
I'm 29 for the record, if that helps.
29, yeah, mate. You're young. That is still young. So I think that's really, really inspiring. So I just wanted to get you on and hear your story in an effort to, you know, supercharge some of the younger people out there and show them what can be done. So on that note, let's get stuck in. So Ed, why don't you just take us back a little bit and tell us what was you doing before you got into the service accommodation world?
Yeah, perfect. So immediately prior to me launching into property and service accommodation specifically, I managed to land myself what I then thought was a dream job with EDF, who I'm now very familiar with for the wrong reasons. Unfortunately, trying to sort out utility bills, a bit of a pain. But yeah, I landed a graduate job with EDF, working on a flagship product, Hinkley Point C nuclear, a new nuclear power station being built. So that was immediately after uni. So I went to Portsmouth University, did a civil engineering degree, landed a graduate job with EDF Energy, and then worked at Hinkley Point C power station.
Can I just ask you, Ed, I'm interested in this, and I asked, sorry to keep referencing Dan, but you know, you guys seem like you kind of run in parallel a little bit, but when you was at uni, were you sitting there doing your studies and thinking like, maybe this isn't going to be the route for me. Maybe I'm not going to put this degree to use and go into kind of a corporate role. I feel like I'm getting pulled onto more of an entrepreneurial track.
Yeah, and I felt that prior to going to university as well. I was a bit reluctant to go to university. I was quite frustrated at this time, actually. I always wanted more, but didn't know how to obtain or what that more was. I was trying all sorts, you know, notoriously and classically, I suppose. Did a little bit of drop shipping whilst at uni. Sold all the chocolate bars at school and everything like that, how it normally all goes prior. But I did feel like I made an overwhelming conscious decision to focus on my plan B, because at that time I didn't have I didn't know what my plan A was. The next step up was I looked at potentially like flipping and buying, selling cars, but I wasn't interested in cars, unfortunately. Um, so I went to university knowing that I never wanted to stick to what the end goal of going to university would have been, but it felt good or the right thing to do from like a risk perspective, I suppose. To always have a respectable plan B to fall upon, but also it appeased my family. You know, my mom and dad were very happy when I went to university and got that job. And ultimately, I just stuck to the traditional path, knowing that I didn't want to.
Yeah, interesting. And you say that your parents were, super happy that you went to uni. Completely understandable. Almost all parents want their children to go to university. Was that the road that they took? Because, we all know that we tend to follow in our parents' footsteps and they follow in theirs, even though, funnily enough, I obviously don't know your parents, and hopefully they're very happy and successful with their own lives. But, a lot of parents push their children down a certain route to follow what they've done when what they've done hasn't served them, right? And it
Yeah.
hasn't worked out for them. Was that the case, or?
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't the case really. They hadn't gone to uni. I was the first person in my family to go to uni, and I think hence why they weren't overwhelmed and flabbergasted, but that to them what they had been taught as well was the right thing to do. At least nowadays is to go to university. So they were it made them even more proud, if you like, and happier that I did
Mm,
go to university because they felt like it. Perhaps I was then on the right route to elevate past what they had done in their lifetime or whatever it was that they might have felt. But they didn't go to university, no, and I think that's why they felt better that I had.
yeah, yeah, I get that. I mean, I can relate to that. I don't have any kids, but my sister's daughter, we really keen for her to go to university, be the first member of our family to go to uni. So I completely get it. So you come out of uni, you go to EDF, big utility company. How long was you there before you started thinking, this just isn't me. I'm not meant for this.
Um, like I said, I pretty much knew from the start in mind that I never wanted to stick something out for that long, and I think for the first 2 years, I was on a graduate scheme where we rotated positions, roles 4 months, which is something I really enjoyed and liked the sound of. However, fairly early on, COVID hit, so I was kind of stuck at home. I got into EDF trading, which was another awesome thing to look out for. Trading electricity on the open market and stuff. That was really exciting and fun. But I was sat at home for a long time, then went back onto site, Hinkley Point C site as a construction delivery manager. And to be quite frank, was surrounded by a lot of old men who probably weren't happy that they spent the last 50 years just sat doing exactly that. And that was quite alarming for me to get probably quite bored and wake up, spend a lot of time on site. I'd leave 6:30 in the morning, get back at 6:30 at night. Would have to work some weekends, and it just felt quite immediately like all for what? Like, is this really going to be my life for the next 50 years? That was an incredibly daunting and scary prospect, thinking that this would be my life for the next 50 years, and ultimately probably a massive driver to help me um, push through and dedicate a lot of serious time and hard work to getting out of that, I suppose.
Yeah, a couple of questions around that is what what do you think? What is your opinion on what made you feel that way when everybody else at EDF, or specifically where you was working, maybe they weren't happy, but they're just like, you know what, I've got a job. I'm grateful for that. I can pay my bills. I get the weekends. It's okay. Why do you think you felt different and weren't able to accept that future?
Yeah, I think ultimately it probably comes back to, I know it gets thrown about a lot in this space, is your why, isn't it really? And there's a multitude of things happening at this point as well. When I first landed that job, it was you know it was better paid than most of my peers who'd just come out of university, that's for sure. However, I still felt that I was pretty much struggling to live a very mediocre lifestyle. So, and at that point, I also um, understood maybe for the first time that what I was earning then was similar, if not more than what my parents were earning, and they were able to provide an incredible lifestyle for me and both my brother and sister as well. And it just had an epiphany of the sacrifices that they had obviously made, for their own lifestyle for us to then benefit and prosper. And I was like, geez, like to be fair, it's actually incredible what they've done. And I really felt the need to then give back. I was at that same time, I understood that my parents were both self-employed. They didn't have pensions, etc. And they're a bit mismanaged finances just because they didn't have maybe they had the opportunity, but they didn't have the learning and that I'd gone through. And I just felt the need to really help them in their future. And I still feel that they're probably not going to like me saying that at all. They're very proud people, and rightly so. But I do feel that I need to really give back to my parents because of what they gave to me and my siblings. At that same time as well, when it comes to me creating and having a family of my own, I really don't want to be strapped down for time and having someone just come and tell me I've got to come in and watch some people do some construction exercises when I've got my firstborn, which is, I know everyone probably feels that way, and rightly so, but for me that was just some overwhelming whys as to it just burned, it just was inside me burning, like I need to do absolutely everything I can to change my life here for the good and for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's amazing, mate. And it just interests me. I ask this question a lot of my guests, because it's like, I'm trying to understand and work out like what is it that sets certain people apart from just accepting, because you could have just stayed on, made a reasonable amount of money, led a reasonable level, quality of life, and ticked all the boxes essentially. But it's like, no, I want more, not through greed, not, just like you just said, because you want a greater quality of life in all areas, and to make your parents as proud as you possibly can. Did you kind of, in a backwards kind of way, even though you wanted to give more, feel the pressure of potentially maybe needing to stay in the job because your parents have worked so hard to put you through uni, and now the reward was that you was in this good job earning semi-decent money? And did you think you might be a disappointment by giving all that up?
I wouldn't say a disappointment, but my mom is so risk averse. Like, as soon as I told that I was going to, especially at the point where I was going to can in my job, which, to be honest with you, I kept on held for dear life. I had coming up to 30 essays and still working full time, which was very intense. And in my mind, that was, again, a huge risk mitigation strategy, but I should have let go a lot sooner than I did. But my mom was putting a lot of pressure on me to not quit. She didn't like the idea of anything it goes against the grain of the traditional route. She thought it'd be too risky, and all that palaver that goes with it. She just didn't understand and didn't want to understand. Now she's much more comfortable knowing that she's obviously seeing me prosper. But yeah, ultimately she didn't want that to happen because she felt it was risky. But at the time when I knew that I did hand in my notice and I was ready to leave, I'd already set up a very strong foundation and mitigated a lot of that risk for anything going wrong.
If you love to travel like me and you understand the power in escaping the money for time exchange trap, but you just don't know how to do it, then building an Airbnb consultancy business could be exactly what you have been looking for. Right now in the UK, there is a completely untapped opportunity through helping struggling Airbnb hosts by turning around their underperforming properties and generating you huge commission payments in the process. We are going to teach you all of the tools and all of the techniques that we've learned over the last 5 years through building our very own multiple six-figure Airbnb business, arming you with everything that you need to swoop in and save the day. Minimal startup costs, zero risk, and almost unlimited potential. Sound good? Welcome to the Airbnb Consultant. Contact us through any of the channels included in the studio notes to get the conversation started. Okay, so yeah, let's get into that. That's pretty juicy. The fact that you'd built up an SA portfolio of 30 properties while you're still in full-time work. That's pretty impressive. So you're in full-time work, and how did you learn the SA business? How did you even learn business? Because you didn't study business at uni. Presumably you didn't anyway. You've come out into this role with EDF. So how did you learn service accommodation? What led you, where did the interest come from of wanting to get involved with property? Because I know you mentioned, lots of other potential side hustles that you was looking to build. And did you take any specific training or anything around that? How did that start? Because that's a big thing.
Yeah, I've not done a whole host or wealth of training, if I'm honest. The main bulk of my learning has definitely been from YouTube primarily at the offset, and then also diving into the Facebook groups, to be fair, and searching keywords as to what questions and topics, and within the communities, any problems I came up with and that I felt like I had to face, someone had already done it previously. So whether it just be Google, reading the book, etc., it was incredibly hard and not the most fast-tracked way to learn, shall we say. But I got a lot of the foundation and especially the idea and principle from YouTube. I knew that I wanted to get in property in the long run, but never knew. I saw it as like complete end goal. Pension, like pension time
Mm.
property, and then from scaling YouTube, just going into an absolute depth of a hole of YouTube, just constantly watching videos, found out about these other strategies in property which blew my mind, i.e. rent service accommodation, and then felt like I really needed to explore that.
Would you
And
say that
that's
you're an obsessive person?
Yeah, I think so. With perhaps not generally, but with things that I tend to
See
take
potential in.
take a liking to. Yeah, I do become quite inherently obsessed, and there's no denying that I am and have been with property as well. Um, I just think it's formidable. It's quite weird. I feel like I've developed almost like a relationship with it. Property as a whole is fantastic and fascinating. And the yeah, it's just still learning every single day, insane amounts, and I have been now for the past 3.5, 4 years. Still so much more to go. It's interesting.
I think that shows a very high level, an unusual level of inner self confidence to go and build a very real and high risk business that involves lots of money and lots of work and lots of risk without any real core foundational training, just scrolling YouTube and taking what you can from the groups and then going out and putting that into practice. Obviously shows a very high level of self-confidence, would you say?
Yeah, and I also had nothing to lose realistically, other than my time, which I felt like that was a fair trade-off for me. Went to SA as a low capital starting point, and I should mention though that I did at this point, when it came to like crunch time, and I was truly devoted to it. I did seek mentorship, so I had a mentor. I had a mentor help me go through the process of obtaining my first deal.
Can you tell me, Ed, first of all, amazing, what you did there. We are, huge advocates for service accommodation. One of the best things about it is that you can start to build it alongside your full-time job, right? And you see a lot of people that say, oh, that's it, I'm going to quit the job and go into property, and they have all these huge dreams, and they've just gorged crap on the internet for too long, and they think that they're going to set the world on fire in 6 months and be financially free and all that kind of stuff. Crazy. But what you did, absolutely amazing. So can you tell me and everyone listening, how did you do that? Because everybody's excuse around that idea is time, right? I've got the job, I come home, make dinner, look after the kids, da 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 da. Before you know it, it's time for bed. There's no chance in hell I've got the time to build a side hustle. Now, I know that you don't have the huge family and the other bits and pieces, but still, where did you find the time and how did you structure it?
Yeah, so I think obviously, first of all, I was willing to take the risk and had the, I have no responsibility really and liability, if you like, and kids are not to say they're a burden, of course they're not, but that's something you obviously have to factor in. I had none of that, to be fair, other than my job, which was incredibly time consuming. Um, and the way in which I did it was just a nuts amount of hard work, which I don't think I find it quite hard for me to advise people to do what I do, although it's changed my life, because I don't, to be quite frank, think that most people are capable of it. Um, just it's insanely hard work, and even when I was working quite insanely efficiently and smartly, it's still insane hard work, long hours, hard work. At one point, there's a lot of like mentally straining work to build up the systems to ensure that I didn't need to have endure lot or be involved in running the business once it was set up, and I didn't want it to compromise my day job at work as well. That was also something very important to me. Um, but then when it came to setting up the properties, I think at one point from when we went back to work after Christmas up until Easter time, I literally had to set up one property over the weekend every single week um, for a few months, and that was incredibly intense because if I didn't, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and probably rightly so, because if I hadn't have completed the setup of a property over a weekend, which is already quite a tough task to try and hit
Very
those
tough.
right standards as well. A lot of preparation involved, and then physical, because our service accommodations at this point were all across the UK as well, so I'd have to travel, pretty much
Wow.
stay there. I pretty much wouldn't sleep for the weekend, try and leverage friends, family, and other people to try and help me out. But if I
So
didn't
you
have,
you had so you had zero social life
um, I try
during
not
that
to
period.
compromise on my social life, but during that period, yeah, yeah, and to go beyond that, and on that note as well, I pretty much detached myself from. It sounds weird and bizarre. And it sounds like a sad sob story. It's really not. It's only now that I look back on it. I detached myself from what then was my life as well. I was in a home because I was working away at Hinkley Point. I was in a home with some great people, and I chose to remove myself from that home, and I actually stayed in one of my early rent service accommodation one bed apartments, just to solely focus on scaling and growing the business when it really became crunch time as to how I need to set up these systems to then scale. Um, what I know now, when I teach people the infrastructure that I've built up, I'm like, wow, okay, I've taught someone in a week how to use the systems, but for me to set up those systems and know that those systems were right for what I wanted and to scale, that took an insane amount of time. So throughout the week after work, I would stay up till midnight. A lot of the time I would stay at work as well, because the computer setup was a lot better than my laptop. But like systemizing systems and doing a lot of the prep work, ordering the items that I need to then prepare for on a weekend where I need to go and set up a property. And if I didn't set up a property on that weekend, I knew that it would impede and impact the property on the next week. So
Mm,
the pressure was immense. And
like a domino effect.
yeah, exactly. So I remember this one time, it's like a Saturday night, probably like 3, 4 in the morning, and I was just like dead to the. I was dead. I was a walking zombie, but I really still had quite a bit of work to do, and just I had to power through it. And I drove down on Sunday back to work, quite quite dangerously, probably. Definitely way too tired um, to go back to work. Definitely shouldn't have, something I probably shouldn't have done in hindsight. Um, but the amount of pressure I did put on myself to make that all happen was immense. Now I'm able to benefit literally from the fruits of that labour. But it was very intense, and not something that I find myself being able to advise either.
So, did EDF know that you was doing all this work behind the scenes?
Yeah, so it's really, really interesting. It was a bit of a is a bit of a topic when I first set up the business. It was a little strange really because obviously I worked for EDF and EDF were the client, and there's a lot of, because it's such a mega project, there's a lot of different contractors on site. But someone did pull me in and say that I need to pretty much close the business down. Um, and I did do a little bit of due diligence and looking into it as to whether I could and had the rights legally to set up my own company whilst working alongside another company, check the contract. Everything seemed fine. I consulted with people. They said it's absolutely fine. I knew a lot of people doing it. Obviously, I thought it was fine as long as it didn't compromise my workload or anything like that, which is definitely something that I stood by as well. And I understood that makes complete sense. And I didn't want it to compromise my work either because I liked my work at EDF and I was very thankful for that as well. But for them to think they saw somehow some sort of security team or something saw that I started my company, and they did pull me in and say that they think I need to close it down or cease business or stop working. And I just had to look this particular person in the eye and say, like, I've just signed some 3-year contracts. I really don't feel like I can do that. Can you just tell me a little bit about what your concerns are? And then the meeting kind of ended, and I was sat in limbo, thinking for the next 2 weeks that I might lose my job. That was very scary because at that point, I know I spoke about earlier how when I did leave my job, I was ready and I had foundations built in place. But at this point, these were this was my first deal that I signed. So I had no idea whether it'd work or not, and I felt like I may have just also potentially lost my job. And then my mom and dad would definitely go absolutely nuts. So that was a really horrible 2 weeks. They just said, "Well, we're gonna have to look into it and see where we stand."
What was their reasons? Did they think you had less folks at work, you were
So
tired, you weren't
no,
performing, or
so the thing that they said specifically was, um, I can't remember the correct term, but they said I was,
a conflict of some kind?
yeah, pretty much a conflict of interest or utilizing my position for financial personal gain.
Hmm.
Um, I think the contention point there was because I worked at Hinkley Point and I originally wanted to set up service accommodations for Hinkley Point workers. I set up my company called
I
Hinkley
was as to
Homes.
see that. Yeah, I was going to ask
So,
about that.
so I understand that may have been a bit of a contention point, and I tried to speak about it with them and what their reasoning was. Ultimately, they just said at the end, "You're fine to carry on, but um, please don't mention within any of your business doings that you work for EDF or on
Yeah.
Hinkley Point, really." I guess it's because ultimately they don't have a leg to stand on, probably, which I felt that was
Mm.
fair. But those 2 weeks up until that point was scary, man. So scary.
Yeah, no doubt. So obviously, people are probably listening thinking, well, how the hell is this guy not only doing the full-time job and getting all these units set up at the same time, but where is he finding the units? Because that's obviously, we know that the market is getting a lot busier. There's a lot more competition, a lot more people trying to source the deals and all the rest of it. But where were you getting all these deals from? Where were you pipelining these deals from?
Yeah, and that was a slow burner, and that's always for me been the hardest part of growing the business. Is there's loads of hard parts. There's so many moving parts, but acquiring the opportunities, acquiring the right opportunities, acquiring the properties for me was definitely where I spent most of my hours, especially initially. It took me about 4 months of non-stop grind, and I really mean non-stop grind, cold calling, leaflet dropping, knocking on doors of the HMO register, you know, and just ringing all the agents. It took me 4 months to get my first deal, which was through an agent, through a local agent, who then since went on to pass me, uh, quite a lot more deals, which is great. But ultimately, my second deal was through a sourcer, who I think missed an angle on what they were selling. Um, and then over the years, I've obtained deals from various methods, direct to vendor, agents, and I've utilized sources for probably at three or four of the deals. But ultimately, when the snowball really got going, I was um, I was getting in deals from the agents, but also like a lot of my D2V campaigns that I'd done in the past 6 months took a while to actually
Mm.
start seeing any benefit. And then when I first started setting up the few units in like early January, this is predominantly in Birmingham, um, the landlord was very happy. He passed me like another four. He then had other landlord friends, and that started growing quickly. And then all of a sudden, when I felt like throwing a towel in the first 6 months quite often and putting in incredible amounts of hard work for what felt like no gain, all of the reward um, from those first 6 months started to pay dividends slowly but consistently, and then it really just started to take off within that period.
So those D2V campaigns, this is interesting to a lot of people because finding the deals is the biggest hurdle for most people. That's
Mm.
before you even have to go through referencing and all the rest of it. But the D2V campaigns, were you targeting like HMO landlords and looking to convert them, or were you looking to do rent to HMO as well as SA?
Yeah, no, ideally I wasn't. Well, to be honest with you, when I first initially set out, I wanted to do rent to HMO as opposed to rent to SA. I felt like that may have been a bit more passive and more convenient for my lifestyle. However, the first deal that I came across, the first opportunity was a two-bed apartment. So I was like, I can't believe I'm putting all this hard work, and they're actually willing to give me this property, but I can't rent to HMO it. Um, and I think I understood that rent service accommodation on the front of it and the face of it is quite a simple concept, but to do it well is just a lot more work and learning that I'd need to do to run it efficiently. Um, but lo and behold, I did take that deal and then scaled it up. And obviously, it's quite funny now how I don't actually have one rent to HMO deal. They're all rent to service accommodation.
Mm.
But initially, when I was looking, I was predominantly looking for rent to HMO deals. And then after that one, I was like, well, I'll do either. And then when I saw that the money and what I'd built and learned and the knowledge I was getting from implementing these strategy, rent service accommodation strategy well, I then chose to just stick to rent service accommodation. So even if we did come across, when I said a few minutes ago that I felt like the second deal was from a sourcer who missed an angle, he was selling a rent to HMO deal, but I felt like that if I took that rent to HMO deal, ran it as a service accommodation, the revenue and profits would far exceed what he had first thought, um, which was the case. I think, yeah, I'm just all in on service accommodation now, but initially it was rent to HMO, and also it was an easier way to target those landlords because of the local HMO registers. Um, so I didn't want to. Obviously, I was willing to put in a lot of time, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time just doing clueless leaflet drops through every single door on the street, which would probably see very very minimal, return. I at least wanted to make sure that it was a property that would potentially be suitable. So downloading the HMO register and just dropping leaflets through those doors was much more targeted and yeah, made more
Mm.
sense.
Was you purely leaflet dropping the HMOs themselves, or were you also sending letters to the owner's
To the
address?
owners, yeah, no, for the most part, I was just doing it to the HMOs themselves, um,
Mm.
time and time again. And obviously, you've got your open rent, your gum trees, and on top
Hmm.
of that, calling the agents. It was quite time consuming just that alone.
Yeah, it's amazing that you. So was you doing that on the? Because I think you said at the beginning your Hinkley Point work was it kind of like a rotation style. So you had chunks of time where you was off,
I
where
was
you
no,
could put.
it's Monday to Friday. Monday to Friday, uh, 10 hours a day, hour there, hour back. So within my lunch breaks, it's funny, I used to sit in the canteen and call agents. And then in the evenings, I'd be doing my campaigns and weekends. Because site is quite secluded as well, so it's not like you could pop out and do some leaflet breaks. Once you're there, you need to get a bus there, you need to get a bus out.
Mm.
It's like Alcatraz.
Yeah, no, I kind of understand a little bit because years ago when I was traveling Australia, I got a job on a big gas plant for ConocoPhillips, and it was bringing in liquid gas from Indonesia, building the pipelines, and it was very much like that. We got bussed out, about two and a half
Mm,
thousand guys, massive site,
yeah,
and that was it. You was there until you got bussed out again. So yeah, I can kind of visualize
absolutely,
uh,
that's what it was.
how it was. So there's no time for networking then, because most of the deals what we recommend, because trying to get through agents when you're just starting in SA is very difficult,
Yeah.
because the referencing for most people you just get blown out the water, and a lot of the courses kind of conveniently skip that part of the process. So we're a big advocate for, get out there and try and meet landlords in person at networking events, and sell them on all the benefits, and then you can kind of, for the most part, if you can build enough of a relationship, you can kind of skip that part, or at least you've got more chance to.
Mm.
But there was no time for that. You didn't have any time to do any networking events, really.
Correct, yeah, and I do think that is the path of least resistance, and I say that's one thing now when I look back on, and I have regularly said that throughout growing that, wasn't lonely again. I'm not here for a sob story, but it was incredibly independent. I didn't go to any networking events really. I didn't network really, full stop. Um, Probably mostly because of the time constraint, and I was busy doing it or working. Um, but also, I didn't understand the true value of exactly what you've just said, which I now do. Going and building up networks is definitely what I would advise, and it definitely is the path of least resistance. And yeah, that is what I would advise to do now for sure. But yeah, it's not what I did.
Hmm. So building the business that the way that you did, Ed, obviously now, you're in a fantastically strong position, learning every day. You've got your business, you're growing, you're achieving great things. Very inspirational, and exciting times. What were to get to where you are today, what were some of the biggest challenges? What were some of the lowest points? Did you ever get turned over? Did you have any bad toxic deals that went wrong? Did you lose money at any time? What were some of the biggest lessons and takeaways, and kind of harder lessons that you took from where you've been?
Yeah, so there's some attention grabby ones, if you like. We've been through some pretty wild setbacks, but what I would like to say to
Let's
start me
hear them.
off, yeah, is whilst they sound drastic and when you're going through them, they're incredibly alarming. Some of the ones that I've gone through, very discomforting, scary. It kind of lasts for a week, and then you're just back into the thick of the business. So the biggest and ever growing pains have been navigating. I think, excuse me, probably the biggest setback, which wasn't one initial hit, was I'd first spent so much time building the business and making good money. And then when it came to doing my accounts for the first year, or for example, hitting the VAT threshold, it felt like I then had to do another whole host of learning as to how to retain that money. And at first, when first looking into it without going consulting people and learning about how you do retain the cash that you make, I thought everything I made was just going to go straight back to the government, and that was an extremely low point. I felt like I'd really screwed up there, and that there was no way around it. So that was probably the most um, challenging and discomforting time, as well as just generally scaling, has been tough. Constantly adapting, putting systems in place, and now managing people is also very tough. Um, but for
Just
Go on.
touching on the accounts, there, Ed, did you get specifically? Did you get hit with like a big VAT bill that you weren't prepared for, or what was the biggest lesson? You weren't
Yeah,
on Tom's, presumably.
yeah, exactly that, and learning about all that was mind-boggling, and I like to try and learn as much as I can myself, so then when I'm in a position where I go and consult someone, I have an idea as to whether they're actually talking legit or not, because I've trusted a lot of people in senior authoritative positions who I probably haven't done, and it's landed me in trouble as well. So I like to have a sound understanding of something before I go and speak with someone on that. But yeah, the first corporation um, corporation tax bill that came in, or at least looked like it was going to come in, the first VAT bill, uh, yeah, both of them were equally as scary as each other. And I just thought I'd done so much hard work, and it's all just going to get ripped away. I was like, I should have just, yeah, should have just
Yeah,
not done it from the start. Thankfully,
but
there's
it's
obviously mitigations. But
but
go
it's
on.
understandable, right? Because, and I've said this before, the rent to SA business model, as great as it is, as well as it works, and the potential opportunities that are there, it is seen for most people as the lowest barrier of entry into property, right? And what that means is that most people are transitioning out of a job based role, an employee role, where they don't know about excuse me, how to run a business or tax, VAT, systems, structure, because you've never had to do it or learn about it. You just you go to work, you come home, you switch off, turn on the TV, life's good. So then you move into SA, and this is our gripe, right? In the courses, it's all about how to find the unit, how to make it look nice, get it on Airbnb, and then it really ends there. There's
Mm,
no business structure. There's none of that. So understandably, that you kind of had to go through those growing pains.
yeah, and that they're scary as well. But so we've got through them, which for me are probably the most challenging, but then there's other like single big hits that we've took as well.
Mm.
So I think one that I've told you is it's so funny for some reason every time I go on holiday and try and enjoy myself, something quite drastic happens, especially within the first couple
I
of
think that's
years.
called Sod's Law. Yeah?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But one time, I took my family away on holiday for the first time. Well, we went away on holiday, and then the first night. I was having calls, middle of the night, 2 o'clock, not that absurd, as an SA operator. But then some pictures come through, and it was one of the properties that we manage was quite literally blazing on fire.
No.
The whole property, sirens, neighbors all out on the street, taped off.
Who was sending you the pictures?
So we had one house and then three houses on just further up the street, and it actually wasn't the one house where we had guests in. It was like two doors down, the house that we had guests in 2 doors down. And they sent me a message at 2 in the morning just saying, Justin, you need to know this is happening. They didn't know that we managed that property. He was like, we're fine, we're safe. Sent me a photo, and I was like, just as you can imagine, so many things just in my mind, just erupting. Um, and he obviously that the guest who sent me the photo didn't know that we also managed that property, who I knew had guests in that weekend as well. So I was just absolutely panicking beyond belief. One, for the safety of the guests, because they hadn't contacted me. So that was the first thing I did, contact them. They had said that they were outside the property. They allegedly came back from a night out. At this point, I don't even know what's happened. They said they'd just come back from a night out. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and saw that the house was on fire. I said,
What
okay,
what 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 time? What time? So was this the middle of the night where you was on
yeah,
holiday?
yeah. This was like I was in Spain. So what are we in Spain, Alex? Is that an hour ahead?
Hour ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my god!
And
So
to be
so you're already in like a zombie stakes. It's the middle of the night, and
zombie
you're looking at
this,
videos of the house on fire.
and it's my first night on holiday. To be quite honest, I was a little bit intoxicated as well, so really panicking,
Oh my
really
god!
panicking. Um, yeah, first port of call was to make sure those guests were safe and okay. They said that they were okay, that the stuff was inside, but they're okay. Um, and then next port of call was to try and establish what the hell happens from now. It was a managed property. It was one of those ones that we're in an absolute tangle of people. I manage it on behalf of someone who rent to service accommodations, the unit.
Oh.
There's an agent involved above that, and then there's a landlord. So I was trying to contact my client frantically, and then also I knew the management company that who he rented it from there as well. Trying to contact them, nothing could happen, and I couldn't get hold of anyone really. So at that point, it just had to go the night, made sure that the tenants were safe, the fire brigade and all the officers were there. And then obviously it just doesn't end there. I was sat up all night thinking, ultimately, what am I responsible for? What's happened?
This is the question, isn't it? Who's
Yeah,
liable in that situation?
Who's liable for what? The guests said that they didn't have a clue what happened. I didn't know whether to believe them or not, obviously. Had no idea. We just had to like wait around, especially the next day. The agent I got hold of said, look, this is, whether it's right or not, they said it's nothing to do with you. We're going to sort this with the landlord. I said, like, okay, if you need any questions, you need anything from me though, paperwork, whatever it might be, you obviously know where I am, you know who I am. That's fine. And lo and behold, I've not heard much and didn't hear much from that afterwards, other than what actually happened, which was CCTV footage of a corner shop over the road came out, and after a Liverpool game, some kids were just setting off flares. One flare got shot up, landed on the roof, and sat in the gutter just blazing away. And then quite shortly soon after, the roof caught a light and set on fire, and was burning for some time because the guests were out and nobody realised, and it kind of went through the night. The house was just absolutely ruined, boarded up. When I went and checked, when I got back from holiday, it was sodden throughout. It must have melted and just destroyed all water pipe work, and pretty rough, pretty insane. So that was pretty catastrophic.
That is terrifying. You must have been scrambling because
Yeah.
your mind goes, oh, I've got to check the paperwork. Did they sign the terms and conditions?
Yeah.
Have I got my insurance? Is my
Uh-huh.
insurance in date? You start going through all that, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that is one of those one-time freak events that can just probably kill a business, especially the size of mine, and then beyond. So that was pretty scary, and definitely a bit of a niche thing that not many people have gone through.
Was you able to enjoy like your holiday after that, or must have been playing on your mind?
So it was definitely playing on my mind. It was definitely playing on my mind. First of all, immediately the next day, having that conversation with the agent, and because I was just saying that, I was like, look, what am I liable for? What do I need to show? What do I need? What do you need from me? Having them pretty much categorically take off the burden away from me, which probably sounds quite selfish, to be honest, but that did ease a lot of my worrying. Having then known that the guests were okay, and obviously I sorted them out, and everyone was fine, I then knew that there's not really much I could do from that point. And if there's one thing that I've learned, it's not to try and worry and dwell on things that you can't and don't have the power to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a strong believer of that. So once I'd kind of found out that this now is just going to have to take its course, and whatever happens, providing that I don't think anything bad's going to happen to me selfishly. I just hope that the landlord's got his insurance all sorted and whatnot. It's just an unfortunate freak event. And that was also perhaps quite selfishly seeing how it was caused, knowing that I couldn't have done anything to mitigate that. If it was a guest's fault and ultimately my fault, then I would have been very worried as well. So I think a lot of my burdens were taken away when I realised that it wasn't my fault and I couldn't have done anything about it, basically.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you could have done anything.
No.
You've done everything that you was meant to do as the managing agent. So it's one of those freak things, but it's good to highlight this because it's so easy when things are going well to just kind of set and forget and rinse and repeat, and the guests leave and they come and they leave and they come. But this kind of stuff, and it just immediately takes me into all the changes in the fire regs, and
mm,
have people done their fire risk assessments. And I've seen stuff online recently of people getting the inspection report letters,
yeah,
which is going to start to
yeah,
grow. So you've got to be on that stuff. It's a big thing. Not
definitely,
just for your business, but for the safety of your guests, and
yeah,
stand on the right side of the law and all the rest of it. I mean, I saw a photo the other day on one of the groups, and it was someone talking about how the front of their oven had exploded, or they didn't know if a guest had broken it or whatever. But the first thing I saw was that it was gas hobs on the top of this cooker, and I just thought, for me personally, I know it's difficult on rent to SA units. You're not going to
mm,
go and change all of the white goods and all the rest of it. But
yeah,
I mean, stuff like that, I don't want any naked flames
yeah,
in the properties at all if I can avoid it. So,
yeah. No, I mean, fire's well, fire's just a big thing, and that certainly prompted me
mm,
to make sure everything moving forward is in order, for sure. We've had a few scares, I've been scammed as well. I've been scammed with requiring a rent to SA deal. Quite an elaborative, strange scam as well. One that, with the way I was scaling the business, I was taking a lot of risks. I was taking on properties that I wouldn't even go and view sometimes because I didn't have the time to go and view. I'd try and send someone and pay them 50 quid to go and view it and get a detailed video when I could. But ultimately, they perhaps didn't do the thorough due diligence, checks that you can do whilst you're at the
mm,
property. With a lot of the conversations that you can have, ultimately viewing a property is fairly standard. It's routine checks that you need to check and make sure that they're there or not. But I feel like the valuable thing about a viewing is you can actually start having a conversation with someone who holds valuable information, which is what I missed out on. I can't quite remember the details of this scam. If you want me to go into it or not.
well, I mean, yeah, scams are always good to hear
Prevalent.
about,
Yeah.
because we hear all kinds of horror stories. Some of our mentees have had all kinds of nightmares with sources. Sources have got a bit of a bad name. They're not all
Mm,
awful. There are some really, really good ones, but there are a lot of bad ones.
yeah.
So it would be good to hear
Yeah.
what happened.
Yeah. So this one was through a saucer and a property in Liverpool, an alleged saucer. I can't remember the specific details. I've
Mm,
done a video on it, so if I did a video on my YouTube if anyone wants to go and look at the details, because I'm trying to recall now from memory exactly how it went. But I think there was a source who sold me a deal. Um, no, but it was really, really strange. They said, um, I couldn't figure out whether the landlord were working on behalf of the landlord, and they were saying that it's gonna they're taking it from the agent, but it's gonna be available. It's gonna be free, and I want someone like you, your company, your nature to have it. And this is where, unfortunately, missing out on the key details is gonna hinder the story. But it was something weird where they were working together as a couple, if you like. I pretty much entered the property, occupied it, and then they teed up the story that fit with me, and I didn't know where I stood. Somehow, the landlord or the agent actually has the right to the property, and they're then taking it back. And it was just all very messy. At that point, I'd run it, as I say, as I had a guests who were meant to be coming, and it got very nasty. Actually, it got very nasty. All of a sudden, very very nasty, and name calling, all this out of nowhere. So I was like, right, I just need away from this, no matter what's going on. And they did literally change the locks. I lost the property, lost the deposit, lost the first. Well, I can't. This was probably about a month in, no. So first month's rent losing, that's fine. Lost the deposit, and then more frustrating. I was begging her at this point. I was like, look, I've fully furnished the property. Can I just
yeah.
come and get the belongings out? And they're just ignoring me. Change the locks. Um,
So
and
you think that landlord and the sourcer were maybe working together in some way to?
Yeah, definitely were, and it's frustrating that I can't recall the details, so I do apologize for that. But the video on my Instagram does go into a bit more detail as to how, because it was quite elaborate. It,
Mm,
it was only later after that certain things fell into place and it all made sense. One of those things with the power of hindsight. Um, but it did happen. They were definitely working, and I've got reason to believe that they've done that a few times as well because I chased some of the previous, whether it was a company who had letters coming through the door. I tried to get in contact with other people who had been in dealings with that property sourcer, and they were going by various different names, and something similar to me had happened to at least two other people as well. So I'm
You've
pretty
got to
sure they
be
definitely
you've got
were.
to be so careful, don't you? Because
Yeah,
maybe not so much you, because you're obviously a very confident guy, very get up and go. You
yeah,
know that you're going to build this business, but there's a hell of a lot of people who want to do this, but they don't have the confidence to go out and find the deals. They can't have the conversation. They can't do the networking part. So for them, the kind of get around is to just go out and pay a sourcer. And a lot of time they're taking on deals that either aren't going to work,
mm,
aren't legit, or in some way are just not going to work out. And we've got mentees who have paid sources for deals on, for example, a 3-year contract, and then quite similar actually to what you're saying. Not after a month, but maybe 12 months on, they've got a phone call and said, "Look, I'm sorry, XYZ's happened. We need to take back the property. The landlord's demanding this or that." And they've had to give the deal back after
mm.
they've furnished it, after they've paid the rent, after they've paid the sourcing fee, after they've paid deposits and all the rest of it. And then they've found out that sourcer has just kept the deal for themselves. So there's all kinds of crazy shit out there,
Yeah, there
where
is.
they take advantage.
Yeah, and I really wouldn't advise going utilizing sources unless you are experienced and know what you're doing. One, because 99% of the numbers that they put out on these packs are just
Yeah,
not real at all. And then two, because yeah, probably I would say that most of them aren't scamming. Most of them are just mis-selling, probably misleading deals. But it's so unregulated, and there's all sorts of shade going around. If you were to use a source. So there's definitely trusted sources out there. Just make sure
yeah,
you
for
you
sure.
you do find them and you do run some incredible due diligence on them because it is very unregulated territory and these horror
It is.
stories are out there. Ultimately, for me and my mindset, I had quite a fairly good approach to that setback. I understood that the risk involved with me utilizing sources of that nature and also scaling aggressively and not sure what the right word is, but probably not as responsibly and as cautiously as I should have. But at that time, the business was making good money, and I wanted to scale. And losing 5k, if that was the first two, three, four, five deals, that would have been a huge setback. Back then, I just felt like it was a bit of a punch in the face, really, and a bit of time wasted. Um,
Mm. Yeah,
but
which you didn't have.
mm,
So at what point during your this incredible growth period where was you business size wise when you finally stepped out of EDF and committed 100% to the business?
um, so at 30 units and I believe this was about 15 months ago, 16 months ago. So
You've been out the job.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So how did you judge that? What was your markers? Was it a financial marker? Was it, a
Um,
certain amount of
yeah,
properties, money in the bank? What was the?
yeah. No. So for me, it was another big pitfall is what I see people doing is as soon as they've kind of replaced their income with so the business is making say if you get I was getting paid or say whoever's getting paid about 3k a month um, they see that the business is then making 3k a month and they quit their job but
Mhm.
for the business making a certain amount of money and then me getting that money is a very different
Mm,
figure so the marker I had in my head was that I knew I wanted incredible growth and therefore all money that came into the business was to be spent back out on growing and scaling. My marker was not a number of not necessarily a figure in mind, but definitely not necessarily a number of units. It was to make sure that I could pay myself a fair wage, which yeah, I obviously only pay myself £1,000 a month, but to pay myself enough to not hinder the business's growth,
Hmm. Hmm.
basically to make sure that payment was pretty much negligible in terms of what the business needs to grow and scale. Um, so yeah, that was
Where,
my
where,
only marker.
where did you? I mean, that's very impressive that you had that. What's the word? That you were so strict with yourself, that you was going to reinvest the money into the business, take the absolute bare minimums that you needed to survive. Where does where does that trait come from? If you're, because that's a very entrepreneurial trait, and your parents are employed, and there's no real background. So is that just something that's in you, or is something that you read or learned or listened to understand that? Because it's very simple to you, made sense to you, makes sense to me, but a lot of people, and the reason that you're still in business today and that you're not back in the job is that a lot of people who go, well, hey, I've got 30 grand, 40 grand coming in a month. I'm going to go out and buy a 10-year-old Porsche and whatever. You know what I mean? Just as an
Yeah.
example, but that's normally what people do.
Yeah, I can't pinpoint it, to be honest with you. It's probably just from learning over time. Like you just said, to me, it kind of makes intuitive sense, but I must have learned that obviously at some point. My parents are self-employed, so they're fairly entrepreneurial. They
Oh, they're
do,
business owners. Okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Dad owns a franchise, and my mom runs her own salon. So they're they're entrepreneurial in that sense, for sure.
Was there
Um,
ever any lessons that you got from them on cash flow, on money in and out, profit and
no,
losses?
nothing specific and detailed like that. I learnt a lot from my parents, perhaps indirectly by way of who
Mm,
they are and how they go about life, but I wouldn't say any specific details like that. Well, it must have been something that I learned at some point. It would have been either a podcast, something that I've read, something that I've watched on YouTube and just had instilled, and something that I
mm.
probably resonated with and made sense, and that I've just took with me. Um, well, I have that kind of that outlook on certain things now as well.
And how do you feel now, Ed, that you've achieved this dream that you had? Obviously, that you've got a long way to go, and it's obvious that you're going to get there. But the amount of additional workload that you now are doing in order to get to where you want to get to in the long term, compared to the amount of work physically and mentally that you had on you in the job, when you weigh those two things up, are you still 100% behind your decision to, grow this big business and become self-employed and all the pressures and risks that come along with that?
Yeah, it's a really, really great question, and I've gone through ups and downs with how I feel about it as well, up until now. So ultimately, I'm so thankful that I have done what I've done and I am where I am. However, there has been points that I did feel like I traded shackles for shackles, because I think there's no doubt about it, at least up until not too long ago, and probably even so a bit now, really, I was a slave to my own business. That was for sure. One thing that can be quite overwhelming is that I can't escape this responsibility that I've got now. Certain things, times, events that if they are triggered, I need to be there. I need to respond. I need to react. And in service accommodation industry, it's a very active business. It can be when you're running 55, 60 units. Um, and that eats into a lot of my freedom in terms of when I want to switch off if I can, which is something I don't like. I really don't like that. Um, and at one point, like I said, I did feel like I traded shackles for shackles, and I really wasn't enjoying my time in the business. It became too intense, too hard, too much. We've since onboarded people. Laura, my partner, has become full time with us recently, and she's just tremendous. She's such a she can just her capacity for tasks is just incredible. So she's dealing with a lot important tasks very quickly as well, which has eased a lot of the burden off me, because I'm focusing on developments now as well. So that was hard, trying to manage and focus on developments whilst managing the SA business as well.
I wanted to ask you about that. It
Mhm.
is obviously service accommodation, especially rent service accommodation. It's a great cash flow business, but you're not building any kind of legacy wealth. You're not generating. You're not building any assets. You're not building any long term financial security. So, yes, the route that makes sense is start to build a business that's generating enough money to then start to invest into assets, which is obviously sounds like where you're going now. So tell us a little bit about that, just in a nutshell, what your future plans are, kind of how this game plays out. What's the end? What's the exit?
Yeah, I think that I could probably answer both your previous questions in one, really, or at least my answer ultimately shows what my stance and viewpoint is. To be quite frank, I love serviced accommodation and the potential uplift on revenue and profits it can bring. And it's also, you get to put your own flair and spin on properties and the way you manage guests. And, it can be very exciting and you can personalize it and can be fun and fresh. But ultimately, the amount of time that I've spent on it is not something that I want to be doing in the future, to be honest. So with one, also acknowledging the fact that I'm making money off managing other people's assets. So there's ultimately a little bit of risk there, and then nothing to pass down, no inherent wealth building. The worst thing I can do is utilize that cash flow and not put it to good use. Spend it on junk or whatever. So it's really important I do put the cash flow and cash proceeds into assets. And that's something I've been focusing on for the past year, scrambling every single bit of cash that I can get into assets to then um, hedge against the fact that I don't have any assets essentially. And what we're focusing on now is again still trying to be aggressive within that aspect of the business as well. So we're doing BRRR HMO conversions. A lot of people notably say HMO, why not SA there? I feel like we can build a bit more of a passive income stream with with
I've
HMOs.
never heard it called BRRR. That's a much better way of saying it.
What
We
do you
use that
say?
from now on. Or
But
BRRR. Yeah.
yeah, there's loads, isn't there? BRRR
Yeah.
makes sense to me. Which is obviously buy. God, I can't even know which way it goes. Buy,
Buy,
refurbish, rent, refinance.
refurbish, rent, refinance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So incredibly aggressive. We're adding value, so creating lumps of cash flow back into the business, and then we're pretty much retaining the assets in the areas that we're working for. Not only do we own the asset, but the cash flow is so good in the area that we're in. Is the cash flow is the same as what we'd make from a rent to rent deal anyway. So the biggest aim is to pretty much strip back our time, strip back the time that is involved in creating the same similar cash flow, and that's the idea of putting it all into BRRR HMO exits, is that not really sacrificing any cash flow, although I would do if it meant that the time, capital outlay,
You
and
get your time back. Yeah.
management costs. Yeah, a lot of what I'm trying to do now is get my time back. Yeah,
I
a
think
huge
it's
focus.
I think it's a really good and smart idea to have that mix of SA and HMO. I mean, HMOs, maybe it's not as sexy, and
Mm,
the month to month potential profits maybe aren't there as they are in SA, but it's stable, it's
yeah,
solid, it's reliable, it's always going to be needed, it's always going to be in demand, and yeah, it's just consistent. And the biggest thing is that obviously, like you said, you're owning the asset. So I think that's so. Will you keep the SA business as you grow the BRRR
yeah,
portfolio?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Getting used to the cash flow that the SA business creates is like I said, I'm used to it now. It creates a lot of cash flow for us. We've built up an incredible skill set as well. So not only do we have our own essays, which rent to essays, which I'd probably say we're not really looking at growing unless I'm a sucker for an opportunity. So
Hmm.
if an opportunity or a deal falls on my lap, then we'll take it. I'm not invested time into scaling the rent service accommodation business. We're scaling the management business and helping our clients achieve who do and are bullish on service accommodation, helping them achieve great revenues and profits. But ultimately, I'm just trying to move my way up the matrix, stability and time. Realistically, if you asked me 1 year ago, 2 years ago, what I felt about how I feel about buy to lets, I would have just laughed and said they just seem like a waste of time. Like what for a few £100? I wouldn't even want that. But I think how I feel now about HMOs is that next stability, that next level up for a bit more stability, even if it means less income, less revenue. I'm probably going to feel about that way about buy to lets in the near future as well. Um, so whether I look at them, but it's just moving my way up, especially as I want to free up a lot of time. It's just about time, and I'll be willing to sacrifice profit and revenue for time back.
Mate, it's so refreshing to hear that, and I think it's so many people are out there, in property, in business for all the wrong reasons, just trying to make as much money as they can, and to then using that money to buy a bigger house and a faster car, and the Rolex watch and all the rest of it. And I don't know if it's an age thing, some wisdom that starts to, appear in your white beard over time. But I don't know. For me, it's just like, give me, yeah, you want enough to have a decent quality of life, be able to travel, and not have to scrimp and scrape to get by. But for me, it's all about just, time, being able to be in control, choose where you want to be, what you want to be doing with who you want to be with. And also the other thing is, and I've met certain people in my life who have had phenomenal success financially, and they've created huge amounts of stuff, houses and cars, and you know what? Pretty much all of them, after they accumulated all of that, just found that with all of that shit just came stress and headaches, and it took up all of the little time that they had.
Mm,
So they ended up just getting rid of all of it. And now they've gone a full circle, and they're like, I get a taxi everywhere. I stay in hotels. Like, I don't want to own anything because it just causes problems,
yeah,
other than obviously I have some properties that just kind of sit in the background. You don't need to worry about. But yeah, so it's really, really good to hear that you're prioritizing just your time.
time,
That's the only
sure.
one thing that money can't buy, right? It's cliche, but it's true.
Well, yeah, it is true and it is cliche, and it's something I'm very aware of, and also perhaps concerned of, because if I'm honest, if I, my goal 3 years ago was to replace my income. I hit that, and then what's the next goal? You hit that,
Make more
and
income.
yeah, next
Yeah.
goal, and you hit that. And the one thing I'm probably scared of is just being on this trajectory of just forever wanting more. And I do still want more now, when ultimately I've got enough now as well, to be quite frank. One thing I don't want to happen is for me to actually have enough and still want more. I'm rubbing shoulders with people who, in my mind, have enough but want more. Um, so whilst I say that I want my time back, and I do want my time back, that is an overriding priority. I don't want to be stuck in a rut of wanting more, and I'm not sure myself how I shake that when I get to that point either. It's just something that I feel like might be on the horizon that I might have to combat.
I think if you're just clear in your mind about how do you want your ideal life to look and be, and what are your priorities, then you can kind of reverse engineer it to, well, what's that going to cost?
Mm,
But you're right. The tricky part is saying, okay, now I'm there, and I'm going to, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to go and enjoy, all of that hard work.
yeah,
Where most people go wrong is exactly what you said. You know, I want more, I want more, I want more. Then before you know it, you're 50, 60 years old, and you haven't done any of the other stuff.
yeah,
You've just worked and worked and worked, and you're too old to really enjoy it. So if you can get to where you're where you are or the trajectory that you're on at such a young age, man, I would say take that and go and enjoy life, go see the world, have a family, spend time with loved ones,
Yeah.
prioritize your health, because you'll definitely be a happier person at the end of it all for sure.
Yeah, and touch wood, that's the plan I want to take. That's the route I want to take.
Yeah,
We'll
mate.
see. Thankfully, I've
Absolutely.
got time on my side.
You do. Yeah, man, I'd love to ever be 30 again. That was a good time. That was a real good time for me. But as we start wrapping things up here, Ed, it's been an amazing, amazing episode. Man. I am so like inspired by what you've done and where you're going and how quickly you've grown. And I'm excited to watch you grow and as this journey unfolds. It's really, really inspiring, mate. So yeah, hope you know that. Hope that you can see and understand how well you've done, what you've achieved, and how inspiring it is to others. Because I know when you just kind of head down grinding every day, maybe you don't ever really look up and think, shit, it's pretty amazing what I've done. So just to reflect that back, it's really, really cool. So well done. Um, I'd just like to finish up with one last question, if you don't mind, being a bit vulnerable, maybe, and a little maybe more honest than maybe we are day to day in our private lives. But it's just around mental health. Yeah, I'm a big advocate for that. A lot of people are struggling in today's world, social media, comparing themselves very easily to the world, right, and where they are and what they're doing and what they're achieving and how much money they've got. And it's easy to pedestalize the guests that I have who are doing great things and think that you've got it all wrapped up and, life's a cakewalk. So I'd just like to ask you today, how's your head, physically, mentally, how are you day to day? You're still having wobbles, down points, low points when you're by yourself, maybe, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're, running around happy every single day, and that's great too. But I just like to ask, how's your mental health?
Yeah, well, being quite honest, I'm in a fantastic place now, and I think the thing is with my mental health, and perhaps others can relate, is I've always thought it's been fine and great. And again, it's not to throw a sob story in that I wasn't, but there are certain things now I'm on the back of it where I look back and I think, maybe that was a bit rogue. For example, really distancing myself for the sake of the business. I don't like advising people to do that. It's really tough because I was quite isolated, and it was just me and my business. And whilst it helped my business, it did make it, I was very isolated. I've gone through lots of ups and downs post that, with the obvious stresses of growing a business looming on you. It can get very intense. I'd be lying if I didn't say just sometimes, very rarely. There's been a couple of times where just so emotionally overwhelmed, you start crying. You don't know
Mm,
why. All I could say at that point was I'm very thankful to start getting people on board and people around me. And that really helped. It really helps not just ease and burden the pressure, but to have that level of conversation and someone understand was incredibly important, because I was around my friends and my peers whilst growing this business, and they couldn't relate. They had no idea what was going on. They knew I was in property. A lot of them refrained from asking because they just didn't get it. And at that point is where I did join a network, and it wasn't to console or to necessarily a shoulder to cry on. It was just to have a level of conversation with someone who actually understands property or just growing a business, and that really, really, really helped me. Something that I wish I'd done sooner personally, but now, to be quite frank, I'm in a great spot. We're growing the development side of the business, which I've got a real spark and love for. Training Laura up, and Laura's coming, my partner, as a beast who's run a lot of the Airbnb and service accommodation stuff. So we're just really happy working together and finding our balance between ourselves and our relationship and how that interacts with our work-life balance as well.
well, mate, the happiness is well deserved. The journey that you've been on, the work you put in, the sacrifices you've made, and the stress you put yourself under is you deserve every bit of happiness that you've got. So amazing, amazing story, mate. So look, Ed, I think we'll leave it there. we're going to put all of your information in the show notes so that people can reach out and contact you. And I'm sure they might want to reach out and ask a few more questions or get some advice. Is there anything that you're specifically looking for? Any, investment opportunities maybe, or any joint venture opportunities, for example, that maybe you've got available?
So yeah, absolutely. We obviously run Hinkley Home Service Accommodation Management. So if anyone's looking to get into the space, then come contact me. We can talk about that. We also sell furniture packs as well, customizable furniture packs with free delivery to most of the UK. Again, that's on our website. You can put in exactly what you want. It'll spit out a price. You pick your color, etc. That's pretty cool. And then, as you've just said, we're scaling quite rapidly and aggressively now, obviously, because it's what we do, our development side of the business. And with that, we're always looking for funding partners. So if that's something someone's interested in, again, reach out. On top of all that, if anyone wants to just contact me, does have any further questions, if there's anything that I can help with, I'm fully open, available, happy to help, ready to chat. Like you said, you've put up my handles and how to get a hold of me. If I can give value back in any way, I'm happy to do that.
Amazing. And obviously based on what we've heard over the last hour or so, I think anyone that was looking to invest, I think you'd be a pretty good shout. So get in touch with Ed. Mate, thanks so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate your time. And thank you to everybody who's been listening and watching at home. And until next week, we'll see you again on another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. Until then, take care. Thank you.